we will not get out of these difficult areas in our lives unless we give up our crutches.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Hey, Mark. Hey, Mark.
Hey, what's up? What's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hey Mark, the podcast where I, Mark, get to have open and authentic conversations about things like mental health, self-development, and the conversations that just don't get to come up on a day-to-day basis, whether they be stigmatized or they're just difficult to bring up. The reason I'm doing that is because, growing up as a teenager, I dealt with a lot of mental health problems, and I just really either I couldn't identify them in myself, or even if I could identify them in myself, I was a little bit, nervous, or I was really honestly just scared of what people might think of me if I did start to talk about these things, whether they were my friends, my family members, a counselor, whatever. And my goal is really just to let other people know that if you are suffering in silence, there's no reason to, no matter how you feel, no matter how scared you are to talk about these types of things, if you are doing it in the presence of a professional or someone that you love or trust, then I think obviously, even though it might be uncomfortable, or even if you do get burned by opening up, that's kind of something that Zach and I got to talk about recently on the episode that I had with him, Plaid Jacket Philosopher, which dropped last week or a week ago. Anyways, 2 weeks ago, I don't know. But anyways, the reason I want to bring these up is just to end any of that, silent suffering that you might be going through. I just want to let you know that no matter what it is that you are going through, life can and will get better for you. And so what I wanted to chat about today is crutches. And I'm not talking about those things that I had to use when I fractured my heel to walk around. What I'm talking about is the things that we use as physical, emotional, or spiritual crutches, whether that be a person, maybe social media, a drug, alcohol, etc. I'm just kind of going to jump into it today. So when we think about crutches, we think of things that we're leaning on, right, as support. And so these things are going to basically be things that we convince ourselves that are helping us push through tough times. But realistically, a lot of the times, they are the things that are keeping us in these tough times. And so we always tell ourselves that we can just quit them or get rid of them, or get them out of our lives whenever we want. We're just choosing not to, right? And so maybe this sounds familiar for you. Maybe that's, hanging out with a friend because you don't want to be alone. Maybe it's being stoned all the time because being sober sucks for you and it's uncomfortable and you don't like being in your own head. Maybe that is drinking alcohol or using any other drugs. Maybe that's just surfing social media because, like I said, whenever you're alone or, stuck with your own thoughts, it can get a little bit difficult. And so the ultimate truth is that we will not get out of these difficult areas in our lives unless we give up our crutches. And so I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable on this episode because I guess this isn't something that I've spoken about, publicly on this podcast. If you know me in person, then it's something that's pretty apparent in my life. And that's pretty much the only way you're going to know this about me. So I thought that I'd come on here and open up once and for all about something that, is something, like I said, something that I haven't really spoken too much on this podcast. I think I've mentioned it one or two times in like an interview, speaking with somebody else. But, I've got a crutch as well. And, that's kind of the purpose of this episode is because, we always look at people, and I'm not saying that people look at me as perfect. I'm just saying that we look at people on podcasts, on TV shows and movies, on social media, and we look at them and think, wow, I want to be just like that. They seem like they've got it all together. They seem like they've got it figured out. And a lot of the times we want to portray that image for other people as well. But we all have these crutches. We all have something that we lean on. Like I said, whether it is a drug, a person, social media app, etc., right? It could be alcohol. It could be literally anything. Anything can be a crutch. Even fitness, even food, like literally anything can be a crutch. And there's certain ways that we can identify these crutches in our lives, but I'm going to get into that later. What I wanted to do first is come clean, talk about one of the crutches I use all the time, talk about how I'm kind of, A, acknowledging it, and B, trying to not lean on this, and then probably introduce it back into my life when I can have a more healthy relationship with it. And what that is, for myself personally, is smoking weed, smoking dope, 420 blaze it, baby. that was one of the things that I've been doing probably on a daily basis for years. And I have taken what I call tolerance breaks before, but that's just because, it gets to a point when you're smoking weed all the time that you don't really get stoned anymore. And I wanted to be able to get stoned again. And so I would stop for about a month, and then I would just start back up and continuing on with my old habits. And this is something that, again, you're either on the fence, nobody's really on the fence about weed. Right? For the most part, you either think it's a great thing, it's not a drug. You hear people say that all the time. Oh, weed's not a drug, man. It's a plant. Cocaine's a plant as well. So that's kind of a stupid thing to say. The other thing is opiates are also plants for the most part. That's how they naturally occur in nature. That's how we found them as humans. And so if you don't think that weed is a drug because it's a plant, then you'd have to probably argue that mushrooms aren't a drug, cocaine's not a drug, and opiates that come from things like poppy seeds or any other source of opiates, they wouldn't be drugs as well. And if you're going to make that argument, you're out of your goddamn mind. So, let's get back into the discussion I was trying to talk about. Weed, like I said, I'm a pretty big advocate for weed a lot of the time as well. I think that it's probably one of the most natural antidepressant, anti-anxiety, muscle relaxant, stress reducers, sleep aids, whatever you want to use it for, really. For some people, it's a diet suppressant. So it's going to make you want to eat less. For some people, it's a diet, accelerator. It makes them want to eat more. But in my eyes, I've always just used it to kind of calm down my ADHD. My ability to, when I have ADHD, my brain is racing off the charts, and you can kind of hear it in my speech when I'm not stoned or when I am sober. I'm speaking a lot faster, I'm speaking a lot louder, and my thoughts are kind of scattered all over the place. And that's why I've always used weed as a crutch, because for me, it helps me hyper-focus on one activity. And so, basically, I've come to realize that I wasn't really able to focus without weed. When I was sober, like I said, my mind is racing. I'm kind of all over the place. I'm kind of, jumping around. And weed was able to help me sit down still and focus on one task. But it got to the point where, I couldn't sit down still and I couldn't focus on any tasks unless I had to smoke weed first. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, if I'm going to film, then I have to do this. Okay, if I'm going to eat, then I have to do this as well. And it started to get to the point where I couldn't do anything without even having the thought first of, maybe I should smoke a joint before this. And like I said, yeah, I am getting a little bit vulnerable about this because I want to open up and tell people my story about this, and I'm not trying to bash on weed either. I'm still a big fan of it. I just don't like the fact that I've become dependent on it. I don't like having a crutch like that in my life. And so, how did I come to realize that, this was something that I was leaning on as a crutch? Like I've kind of said, I had to take a look at my life. For myself, I'm a pretty big advocate for journaling as well. And so, when I kind of realized that, my life was kind of in the same spot all the time. I was working, I was working my ass off every single day. I realized that my life still felt stagnant. I wasn't really making the progress that I wanted to make. So I sat down and started journaling all my behaviors on a daily basis. And I started to realize more and more that there was a lot of behaviors or habits that I had that were serving me. And there was a lot of behaviors and habits that I had that I was serving. And so what I mean by that is there's things that we do that come and benefit us, whether that be, eating well, reading, journaling, working out. And then there's things that you have to serve, which are things that are, things that you might do compulsory, or compulsive. Yeah, you might be compulsive with it, or you might feel like you need it to do anything else, right? So a lot of people, they don't want to be alone, so they feel like they need to be with someone all the time. That's kind of a big red flag. A lot of the times we use these things because we want to calm down certain, stimuli, or you want to calm down certain sensations in your body. A lot of the time my signals were, that weird pit in my stomach when I got too anxious, or the fact that, when I would go to bed at night, I wouldn't be able to fall asleep right away. These were things that I started to use weed for. When I would get that pit in my stomach, when I was getting anxious, I would think, oh, maybe I should just smoke a little bit of weed and that will calm me down. A lot of people, they get the same thing when, they have to go and speak out in public, or they have to do a certain thing, or, you hear about this all the time with guys at bars, how they have to take a little bit of liquid courage to take the edge off. This is the exact same thing. It's called leaning on a crutch. And it gets to the point where you can't actually do regular, normal, everyday human things without having some sort of a substance or a person holding your hand and walking you through these things. And so, like I said, regardless of what it is, we all have a crutch. And I'm not trying to say that having a crutch is bad. What I am trying to say is not acknowledging that you have a crutch and not acknowledging that you should try and build more of a healthy relationship as opposed to a dependency on that crutch is something that you should start to work on. So, with myself, like I said, when I was smoking joints all the time, it really helped ease my anxiety. But what I started to realize was maybe there's a reason you're having that anxiety in the first place, right? What we try and start to realize, or I guess what I've started to try and realize, is that all of these negative feelings or sensations that we have going on in our bodies, for myself it was anxiety, maybe not being able to focus, those are signals that your body is sending you for a reason. And so, say you're somebody that has to take a drink before they can talk to a beautiful woman at a bar. Maybe the fact that you get too nervous to speak to a beautiful woman at a bar is a huge red flag for the fact that you probably A, either need to learn how to respect women better, or B, need to work on your communication skills, or C, it's a combination of both. And again, I'm not trying to say that it's bad to have a crutch. What I am trying to say is that it's bad to not know that you're using a crutch, because if you're not aware that you're using a crutch all the time, then that crutch will start to control your life. You become dependent on it and you start to think that you can't function without it. So whether your crutch is social media, always having to be with somebody, always having to kind of have somebody like readily available to talk to you, whether your crutch, like me, is a substance or some sort of a medication that you kind of need to always have in order to function properly, these are examples of a crutch. And so I found out my crutch through journaling and just trying to be a little bit more self-aware. And also I found this out due to having a conversation with one of my friends. Him and I were kind of talking about, I was talking about the fact that, he probably drinks a little bit too much in certain social situations. And then he brought up the fact that I always have to be stoned. And so it kind of at first pissed me off, which is a huge indicator that you don't know that you have a crutch, because first you'll get defensive about it. And whatever it is that you're thinking about right now that's kind of pissing you off when I talk about this, that's probably your fucking crutch. And so don't get mad at me, man. Get mad at yourself. So sit down and start to realize that, look, these crutches, like I said, aren't always necessarily bad things. And I'm not saying to my buddy that he has to quit drinking altogether, even though that's my perspective, because I don't personally like to drink. But in his perspective, I'm reliant and dependent on smoking weed. And so that's kind of created an unhealthy relationship with me and the drug. And before we kind of continue on going through this conversation, you're kind of starting to think, well, Mark, you're just some fucking stupid idiot pothead. My background with mental health, I actually went through the cycle of kind of going through all these different antidepressants, anti-anxiety pills, all of these different things, and ADHD medication as well. These were prescribed to me on like 6 to 10 week cycles for years, and my brain chemistry started to disagree with taking any of them. I got wicked side effects from all of them. And it got to a point where my doctor was asking me, look, man, would you be interested in just trying to do some prescription marijuana? That way we could measure your dosages, and then that way you'd also not have to worry about, because this was way before it was decriminalized and made legal here in British Columbia where I live. Again, if weed's not legal where you live, I'm not an advocate for it. But if it is legal where you live, then go ahead and smoke on. But anyways, I got prescribed this from a doctor, and he was the one that basically told me that I should be smoking it on a daily basis to ease my anxiety. This is a conversation you're probably going to have with your doctor or with a counselor or with your employer, whatever it is. But what I'm trying to say, I guess, once again, is just to be a little bit more aware of these crutches that we have in our lives so that we can start to have a little bit more of a healthy relationship with them. So you might ask me, what's my plan moving forward? Am I never going to smoke weed again in my life? No, I'm going to be 100% honest. That's not my plan whatsoever. My main plan is basically to just be sober for a while and listen to my body when I do get anxious. Why am I getting anxious? And I'm going to try and break down these sensations and emotions that I start to feel, because I want to just be able to kind of overcome my anxiety and my ability to not focus and all these other challenges that I'm facing without having to rely on a crutch. Because what if one day I don't have access to that crutch? Right? That was the thought that really scared me. Is what happens if I lose my ability to get my crutch? I'm going to be honestly incapacitated. I don't know if that's the right word, because I don't really know the definition of that word, but I think you understand where I'm coming from. My idea is I want to be able to have a more healthy relationship and do things because I want to do them, not because I have to do them. So if you've had an experience like this, or this is kind of a reality check or a punch in the face for you, then just understand that you're not alone. And if you need support dealing with this, then feel free to message me. And I can try my best to point you in the right direction. But again, the best way to kind of deal with something like this is to speak with a doctor, to speak with a counselor. But if you don't feel comfortable doing any of those things, feel free to message me. You have me on Instagram. If you don't, then my Instagram is at Mark D. Henriksen. It's going to be on the bottom here if you're watching the YouTube version of this. If you're listening to the podcast, it's in the podcast description. Look me up, message me, and just let me know, hey, I need a little bit of support. Can you guide me in the right direction? And I will try my very best to do so. Like I said, no matter what, we all have these crutches, and you're not alone with any of this. Your life can and will get better. It just takes a little bit of self-discipline, a little bit of work, and a little bit of patience and time, because along the road, we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be speed bumps. And the idea is we want to be able to overcome these things without our crutches. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that this brought a new perspective into your life. And I hope this kind of helped you out with kind of realizing that, look, we all have these crutches. And if you're in denial of this crutch and you're telling me, hey, I don't have a crutch, you're a fucking liar, and you need to take a look in the mirror and really take a good hard look and figure out who the fuck you are and what you do on a fucking daily basis, because every one of us has a crutch. That's all I got today. Thank you so much for listening. Much love and peace out, baby.